Oh, hello. A series of videos about what we might do after the virus. Slightly different today. I want to think and talk a little bit about what might well happen in the UK over the next 12 months. I had a visit from a parent, one of the young people I teach, yesterday, and she was having to rush back to get into the UK before quarantine, and she had no optimism at all about returning to this country and effectively couldn't wait to leave. So, sort of set my brain in order, or going, I should say. Right, okay. What's probably likely to happen? There are two inevitably conflicting things. There's a kind of direction of movement of the country, and then there's these kind of swirling counter forces. The Marxist amongst you might sort of recognise what those two things might indeed be called. Yeah, thesis and antithesis. Yeah. First of all, we have a government which is very, very determined to follow a particular agenda. We can certainly see this in the background with its Brexit negotiations. Doesn't really seem to care about the fact that we haven't realistically got that oven-ready deal at all. More about that in a short while. So the government is kind of focused very much on, sort of building its own particular enigmatic project. In the 80s gave us Thatcherism. We haven't quite got Borisism. What we've got is kind of Britannia Unchainedism. So you have senior members of the cabinet who are undoubtedly engaged in a belief or trying to restructure the British state to make it more neoliberal friendly. And certainly that's going to be a running strand through the next few months. Very directly, schools go back in about 2 weeks. It looks very, very likely that anything up to a third of children will not return to school. They simply won't go. Will create a crisis in schools. This will be followed by a second crisis, which is all of those kids coming down with a variety of different things. It need not necessarily be COVID. You shove kids back in school in the autumn, they go down with stuff. It's flu season, etc. My prediction would be that by the end of October, no more than half of British schools will be operating at anything like 50% capacity. This creates a major problem because the government is relying on schools for, in essence, free childcare. The knock-on effect of a lot of this stuff will be a further crisis in the whack-a-mole idea of local lockdowns. There will be spills of coronavirus into the community. We're already at an R rate of over 1 at the moment, and it's the middle of summer. Okay, epidemiologists amongst you will recognise that come the autumn that's going to get a lot worse. So what's going to happen is you'll have schools, for example, as pools of infection, which will then go home. This will lead to a mounting pressure on the NHS. The government is very, very likely to have to backtrack enormously about what it's going to do. And to be quite honest, I don't think they can shut that genie in the bottle down. The whack-a-mole thing, if any of you have actually played whack-a-mole, the game gets faster. Okay, you have to hit the moles quicker as time goes on, and that's going to be October. So there will be an ongoing crisis within the economy, just simply in terms of childcare and people being ill. Simple as that. Okay, this is combined obviously with things like the end of furlough. The government's very keen to end furlough, so we'll be looking at around about 2 million people unemployed. It's debatable the extent to which the government is going to actually bail people out from not being evicted. I reckon they'll bring in some measures, but I think they will still be apparently quite happy with a certain level of homelessness on the streets. Really not good in a pandemic. So obviously all of that stuff will have a very, very much a knock-on effect. So all of those basically businesses that have spent all of that money starting up again, be in terms of even Weatherspoons pubs, will find themselves suddenly shut down again, if nothing else simply because their workers will have to self-quarantine. Now, we can decide not to go through that process, but then you end up with the NHS once again being overwhelmed. So, needs must. The government has a particular thrust to this. Projecting forward from that, you end up with another crisis, a much, much bigger one, which is swirling around, which is both the COVID crisis and the economic crisis coming together as one. Disaster capitalism fans amongst you, if you don't know what that is, I'll put a link down below. Disaster capitalism is when the ruling elite will basically use any crisis they can to further their agenda. So, what's going to happen in November/December? Well, the government will argue that in order to get the economy moving again, they will have to do their usual thing, which will be to remove red tape. Okay, I can see this coming hand in hand with an attack on, very, very basic rights in this country. It will probably be led by the concept of immigrants arriving by dinghy, so expect to see a lot more of Nigel Farage complaining about people being put up in hotels. Isn't it unfair when our workers are on the streets? Yeah. Okay, so there will be that. The government, I think, in terms of their Brexit negotiations, are going to have I think they're trying to hold out, if you like, with the idea that they can wrangle a deal to effectively give them a reasonable level of access, because this will be quite destabilising for Europe as well, giving them a reasonable level of access, but at the same time allowing them to push through the reforms that they want. So, come December, there will be a huge push. You can expect the press to be backed on this, because the government will probably decide that the press should take some more advertising the government, a bit like they did about 3 or 4 months ago, because that money's coming to an end now. So they'll get the press on side no matter what. Gavin Williamson will go, by the way. That'll be when the school's shut. We'll get someone else. And we'll stutter our way into the new year with this idea of a debate in the country as to where exactly we should be going economically. And obviously that'll be down the route of deregulation. I can see there'll be calls for a reduction in the minimum wage. That will work. There will be calls for a reduction in any form of basic workers' rights. You've got this kind of reserve army of the unemployed, which will apply a great deal of pressure on people to simply accept whatever terms they can get with things. This is combined with effectively any form of low-paid job disappearing entirely for at least a few months. So we can expect some real crisis measures by the government to ensure that the British economy is in good shape for 2021. I'm not quite sure quite what that's going to do to British workers. It's not going to be fun, guys. So, we'll end up probably with a botched or at least a longer Brexit deal in the new year. We'll end up with horrific stories of care homes once again being hit. I myself have been doing some work in a care home over the summer, and the residents are not being tested. No plans to test them until September. So if one of those goes down, the guys that I work with, they're all elderly people and they're very vulnerable. That's that. Think of the money we're saving there. So that would be my basic predictions. We're going to see an enormously big push with this concept of getting rid of things that are an encumbrance to the wealth of us all. Expect a lot of noise around the Human Rights Act, for example, around that. Again, probably tied in with a few stories about immigrants not going home because they might be gay or something, being shot. Yeah, okay. So, I don't know, guys. I don't know. See what you think. You may or may not agree with me. You might think that everything's going to be hunky-dory, that the tales of COVID have been made too far and everything will be absolutely fine, and Boris will make a joke at the dispatch box and we'll all laugh. Let me know. Anyway, just an idea.